Great. So I really agree with what Scott mentioned. 2 years ago, it was the first time I gave a public speaking talk. I wouldn't have imagined I would have accepted something like this. I'm not in the moon yet, but this is a major milestone getting to there. So today I'll be talking about creating an inclusive engineering culture. Before we get into that, why do I care? Why are you presenting, Yenny? So allow me to introduce myself briefly. Back in the days, I went to an all-women's school growing up, so I was less aware of these gender stereotypes. That changed as I studied computer science and I entered the industry. I came to realize that not being the majority sometimes means that there are more barriers to break through. So I have a small taste of how it's like to be marginalized. But now as an engineering manager, I also lead the Women in Tech group at Yelp in Hamburg. I have a bit more power and privilege, and I hope to change that. That's what got me into inclusive environments and helping teams create that environment. I really like seeing the positive impact that can bring. Previously, I've organized summits with my colleagues for this cause. I've also experienced giving out ally skill trainings. I've given a few talks on unconscious bias, workplace culture, and the importance of ally skills. That's why I'm here today. So what might be going through your head? There are a lot of these talks going around already, so maybe you think, isn't that just about being decent people? Or maybe other people are already trying to solve this problem. Don't we have bigger fish to fry? If we look at the schedule, there are already a lot of problems that engineering leads need to take care of. Is that one more thing that I need to think about? Also, some people might think that I have questions, but how do I approach that? Is that okay for me to ask these questions? So hopefully in this talk, I can address most of these concerns. To set the tone, this talk is about the approaches for us to create a more inclusive environment, and it's by no means to try to shame our behaviors. We all make mistakes, we're human, and I hope that we can learn together. Another thing is I'll cite some research or studies, quotes, so you can find the sources at the end. I'll share the slides after this. And given my experience, we'll use women in tech as a case study, and it will be the main focus for the talk. But that's not to say that other underrepresented groups are not important. It's just I'm more familiar with this area. Great, so here is your menu for today. Why do we want diversity? And if we want to amplify that effect of a diverse workforce, how can we make use of inclusion and make use of belonging? And of course, we'll talk about how we can create this inclusive engineering culture that we want. Great. So why do we want diversity? Personally, I think diversity is a little bit of an abstract concept, and so I would rephrase it into something like this. Essentially, it's a question of why do we want people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different genders to come together and work in a team? Two things, I think first of all, it's the right thing to do, and second of all, it's good for business. As we see from the previous talk, we're in tech and we face problems that are unprecedented. There are a lot of difficult problems for us to solve, and we want people from a diverse background, diverse perspective to come together to solve these diverse business needs. We don't just want one way of solving problems, we want the best way. So it's not a surprise that gender diversity can improve team decision making. It can help teams become more creative. To make the best use of this, what we need is a supportive infrastructure. That makes sense because if we get these people into the door, we have to make sure that they have an equal chance to succeed, that their voices will be heard. And to create such supportive infrastructure, we'll talk about two things, about inclusion and about belonging. So let's dive deeper into these two concepts and what we can do about that. So to quote, one of my favorite quotes is, diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is like being asked to dance. When it comes to a workplace environment, I would imagine something like this. For diversity, it's like recruiting people from a different background, helping them get together to solve a diverse set of business problems. And once these folks get into the door, let's think about how to ensure everybody has the same chance to succeed. And when we move on to belonging, it's a little bit more than just good vibes and friendships in the company. It's more about helping people bring their best self and most authentic self to work without having to worry that they will be treated differently. And that's crucial to performance and also retention, which I think a lot of engineering leads care a lot about, including me. So now the question becomes, how can we create this culture where people from all backgrounds can belong and succeed in our teams? As technical leads, I think it's crucial for us to think about this problem. Before I became an engineering manager, I got a sneak peek from one of the more senior managers that I work with. So what he's saying is, when you're a manager, it's like you're forever on the stage. People will be watching all your words, how you say things, what kind of actions do you reward, what kind of actions do you penalize. And this is exactly how we create team culture, how we create company culture. So if we're in a leadership position, we need to be aware of the influence we have and do something about that. Because being inclusive means that it will harm our people and harm our business. And as technical leads, we can do better than that. We have a lot of things we can do to address this. For example, being active advocates for our people, acknowledging their contributions, and also advocate for their recognition. So after we talk about that, let's go into the more strategic side of things. How can we create this inclusive engineering culture, you and me? A few things that I want to mention. One is to make inclusion a company-wide goal. So if you're in the position that you can decide that, there are some methods that we can try to use out. As for bottom-up, you don't have to have a title to start an employee resource group. But we can also go through, if we're not in the group of underrepresented people, then how can we try to facilitate that from happening? And at the same time, as part of our job, we have different responsibilities. So what kind of things we can slip in here and there to make sure that we're putting some inclusive elements in our day-to-day work? Great. So if we want our employees to care about this topic, we need to show that the company cares as well. One of my favorite values at Yelp is called play well with others. What it means is we really value employees that can bring others up. So even if we have people, individual contributors who are very bright, but if they cannot make people feel welcome to their job and making sure that people are bringing their authentic self, they're probably not going to have a very successful career at Yelp. And this is also an aspect of how we evaluate our employees. There is one thing that we use to map it with our employees' career, and that's the engineering career levels. So we have several aspects that we can map the employees' performance to. And here are some of the examples of categories that we look at. For example, well-being, community, and championing. That is more relevant to today's discussion. So we talk about helping creating an engaging and supportive environment for the team. We talk about creating communities that can facilitate that, and also building a diverse pipeline so that we can ensure that Yelp will have a diverse workforce. This is something we pay attention to. This framework that we have is directly tied to promotion and also to compensation. And the reason we care so much about this is because promoting people who don't have the skills to make employees feel welcome actually prevent the company from having a culture that is inclusive. So as of all the projects, we want to know how effective it is, what kind of things we want to measure. And diversity and inclusion programs shouldn't be an exception. So Scott already mentioned the Lean Startup book by Eric Ries. Several steps that we're thinking about is build, measure, learn, and repeat. So same for here. This is something that we can measure. We have been measuring our inclusion programming the last few years through this survey called Annual Employee Engagement Survey, and also manager feedback survey. By the way, I just got my manager feedback survey a few days ago. It's definitely a very nerve-wracking experience, because as managers, you don't get too much feedback, right? So now you get a report card. But that aside, this is one of the questions that is inside the form. My manager makes it easy for people from diverse backgrounds to fit in and succeed. Looking at the result, I think that we still have room for improvement, but then I think that this is the right direction that we want to go. Great, now let's talk about a bottom approach to start an employee resource group. So since I lead the Women in Tech group at Yelp in Hamburg, I'm gonna give examples on the Women in Tech group that I'm more familiar with. So there are disadvantages being a woman in tech. And by creating these Women in Tech spaces, we're working towards leveling the playing field and also sharing a space where women feel like they belong. And we'll talk about how this space can create a safe space for women and also offering the necessary networking and professional opportunities. Providing women in tech a safe space, because it's difficult to fight against the system when you're only one person, especially when it comes to handling difficult situations at work. It can surface in the form of, say, microaggressions, stereotypes, biases, or worst case scenario, even sexual assaults. And this group can serve as the front line for women to seek advice and also back each other up in case something like that happens. And even in recent media spotlight, we understand that not all the human resources departments are doing a really good job in areas like that. So hopefully having a group like this, we can turn to each other for the next steps. We don't have to wait till the Me Too hashtag comes up to know that something has that the culture of the company has a problem. Another thing that is interesting is to create networking and professional opportunities. So sometimes being underrepresented in tech feels like you're going to a dinner, you're at a dinner table, where people are very excitedly talking about things that they're interested in, and sometimes you just don't have anything you want to talk about, and it's very difficult to join in. So sometimes it feels like this, and it makes sense because people who are more similar tend to get along better. But then these kind of informal conversations are very important because people talk about company dynamics, they talk about future directions, and it has a positive impact on people's jobs if they know information, right? And so this is crucial for us to create an environment where women can also share this kind of information. One of the more important ones is salary ranges. So we know that there is a pay gap for women, not just in tech, but also across different industries. And oftentimes they found out that they're being underpaid when a male colleague who is doing the exact same work at the same position share how much they earn. So this is something that's crucial for someone's career to move forward. So women in tech can provide these kind of opportunities, but it's not limited to the members in the group, right? Because they all have their network, and then coming to this group like this, they can bring in their external network as well, and hence increasing the visibility of the members in this group. But you might be asking, so if I'm not inside this group, and I probably cannot start it, and what kind of things can we do to help with this situation? So I'll share with you one story. It's one of the senior managers that I've worked with before. So he's not in the Women in Tech group, but then he saw that in the Hamburg chapter, we didn't really have a Women in Tech group. But then we have one in the San Francisco office in the headquarters. So what he did was he went to the lead from the San Francisco office, and he got all the information of how often they meet, what kind of activities they do. And they set up a Google group for us and called a meeting of what all the women in our office. And he told us, these are some of the things that they do. So here are some ideas, feel free to take it on. So it all started with some social lunches, we're just casually talking. But now we have expanded to have 13 members. Apart from these social lunches that we have, we also organize an annual summit across Yelp to talk about diversity and inclusion and to showcase the work that women in tech have. now the interesting part is, as a technical lead, day to day, what else can we do to help with creating such a culture? So I'll talk about some of our routine work. For example, mentorship, sponsorship, and fair recognition. Mentorship basically means that we're sharing our own experience to help other people take a better decision. And providing members of underrepresented groups with role models, and we can help them with their career with our own experiences. Helping them grow, getting promoted, or become better engineers helps balance out the inequality. I want to share my experiences with you. Virginia here, she's one of my mentors I have at Yelp. I remember when I first joined Yelp, I was a fresh grad. It was several years ago. And then I haven't really tried interviewing. I haven't done project leading. I haven't started giving talks. So I remember the first time I do these things, I go to Virginia and I tell her, I don't think I'm ready for this. I really doubt if I'm good enough to do any of these things. And she will tell me that, actually, she feels like that sometimes too. But then the more she does that, the better she feels about it. It's important for me to feel like at that moment I wasn't alone, and somebody else has actually gone through that path before. So it means a lot to me whenever I encounter some tricky situations at work. Sometimes I ask myself, what would Virginia do in this situation? And it gives me a lot of confidence, and it makes me feel like I'm more confident to make the right decision going forward. So I also have a mentee, and her name is Gilsum. She joined our team as a software engineering intern. So back then, she wanted to explore software engineering as a career path. Growing up, she faced a lot of oppositions for her decision to be in tech. And I'm really happy that after the mentorship experience, after she joined our team, she decided to come back full-time to Yelp Hamburg as a full-time employee. And I'm very glad that this experience made her realize how good of an engineer she is. Fast forward a year now, she already passed her 1-year Yelpiversary. So I'm really proud of what she has achieved throughout this time. And this is how I see mentorship: having advice from people who have been there before and reassuring them that they're not the first to do anything. Talking about mentorship, I also want to bring up sponsorship. Oftentimes, people from underrepresented groups in tech get a lot of advice. You should do this, you should do that. But then they don't get enough opportunities to showcase their work or to learn from the experience, right? And so that's why I want to bring it up, how we can, as technical leaders, we have the power to give people the opportunities. So here's a comic that I think sums up mentorship and sponsorship really well. I'll give you some minutes to look through it. And let me share with you one successful story for sponsorship. So it's about Virginia. So it was her first time doing a public speaking conference talk. And at that time, she was a bit hesitant. She's thinking, that project I didn't even build myself. My colleagues did it. She thinks that maybe she's not the right person to give the talk. At that time, her manager found her a conference. We're like, look, Virginia, this is Pi Bay. I think it's a perfect fit for you to go and give a talk. What we can do for you is the team can help you do a dry run. We can give you comments, but you got it. You can do it. And afterwards, it was actually a really good career opportunity for Virginia. So that was a good opportunity. It's a good example of what good sponsorship looks like. With a sponsor, women are more likely to have their ideas endorsed, more likely to see them developed and implemented. Now think about the people you last nominated to lead a project, recommended a book to, and referred to work at your company. Out of all of these people, how many people are from an underrepresented background? If the answer is not too many, then this is definitely something we can think about. Because to change the status quo, it doesn't happen naturally. It requires to actively think about it and make actions towards that goal. Another aspect of our job is to recognize people for the great work they do. And this is an important part to create a fair workplace culture. Studies show that women's ideas are taken less seriously compared to men. And this is not just in tech, it also happens in other sectors like politics. In the White House, they have this strategy called amplification strategy. So whenever a woman makes a key point, other women will try to repeat that and giving credit to its author. That's something I think about as well in meetings, helping people who have less of a voice to speak up and get the recognition they deserve. One thing that reminds me of is something called Yelp Love. So it doesn't have to be Yelp Love in specific. There are a lot of companies, they have their own version. What this does is you can send love to your colleagues for something nice they do. It's like a recognition, no? Maybe they prepared you hot tea, maybe they're nice to you that day, they launched a very, very long project, or maybe they took over your on-call rotation, who knows? One of the thing that we do at Yelp that I appreciate is whenever we launch a product, we prepare something called the love link. And this is what you see on the screen. So when we prepare a love link, we reflect on the project and think about every single person who contributed to it. This is a good exercise because without this process, we tend to give the credit to people who are loudest, people who are already pretty famous inside the company. And we might leave out these voices that we didn't hear. Another way that something like Yelp Love can help is positive attribution, positive reinforcement. So praise is not just a feel-good thing. It's also a way to show people that they should, what kind of things they should do more of. For example, if a person is normally pretty verbose and take a lot of space during meetings, and in this meeting, they let other people speak, they make sure that we have a more equal speak time. This is the moment when we can slip in a Yelp Love and telling them that, hey, you did a good job here. This goes a long way, and especially as a leader, this is how we change a person's behavior. This is how we change a team's culture. I also want to bring up practicing ally skills. Essentially what that means is creating an inclusive culture through speaking up against racist, sexist, or homophobic behaviors. And to practice these ally skills, first of all, we need to understand the privileges that we have. These are something that we rely on. So privilege means an unearned advantage given by society to some people, but not all people. It's probably something that we didn't work for, but we have. So to be more concrete, I've prepared a list coming from Frameshift Consulting for you to check your own privilege. So I'll give you a minute to go through that, and then I'm going to share with you mine. All right, great. Coming back to here, so I can share my privileges with you. I'm part of the dominant ethnic or racial group growing up, because I'm from Hong Kong. I'm cisgender, I'm straight, not disabled, legal resident, speak the dominant language if you think about English, not German. Neither too young or too old. I'm of a certain height, size, or shape. I'm not a mother, not a caregiver. I'm from an upper or middle class family. Pretty much like I go through the whole list. So sitting here, you could be a senior engineer, you could be a tech lead, you could be a manager, and we all have some privileges that we can fall back on. What that means is whenever we speak up, it's less likely that we have to suffer the consequences of speaking up. In fact, people even think that it's an altruistic act for you to speak up against people who are underrepresented. But some people might not have the luxury that we might have. We want to encourage one another to speak up and to point out things that are not fair to others. I will also encourage you to attend and lead ally skill trainings. These are the environments where we can practice the best comeback, or like a way to deal with uncomfortable conversations or situations that arise at work. But one thing that I want to share with you, this is my ask to you, is as a leader, before we encourage other people to adopt a certain behavior, let's try to set a good precedence. The reason why I'm bringing this up is usually I have talks like this, and then people come up to me and they say, oh, Yenny, this is interesting. I'm going to show it to so-and-so because they really need to read this. And I'm going to show it to X because they want to see it. But I don't see more of a self-reflection of what kind of things we can do better ourselves as leaders. As we mentioned, being a leader, you have more responsibilities. People look up to you. So it's important to also reflect upon oneself and to admit the mistakes that we make, because it's really not a shame to do that. And to make you feel better, I'm going to tell you a mistake that I have made and how I dealt with it. So it was an ally skill workshop that I was facilitating. So I'm trying to show people how can we be more inclusive to other people. So throughout the whole time, the camera was behind me like this, and then there was someone who was remote calling in, and I just didn't see this person at all, and I have my back to them the whole time. They raised their hands wanting to speak and contribute for several times. It was not until someone in the audience told me, Yenny, he wanted to talk a few times already, that I realized that, I totally ignored someone who called in. So that was definitely a mistake. I didn't feel good about it. But the way we deal with it is we apologize, we reflect upon it, and then we do better next time. So this is something I will encourage you to do too. It's not like we cannot make mistakes, but we need to acknowledge that, and then we can learn from the experience. Great. So I want to close off by saying that an inclusive engineering culture is only achievable if all people are on board. After this talk, I hope that we will all lead a change in the tech culture, and let's make this industry a better place for everyone. Thank you.
Also, one second before we go out for break, I have announcements about who winners are for various competitions.